Roughly 2 million engaged FPL managers have already created a team ahead of the new season. I'm going to reveal the template amongst us. Not only that, I'm going to scrutinise all the negatives and I'm going to point out the positives as well. First of all, I like that it leaves £500,000 in the bank for flexibility on transfers going forward, but I'm not too keen on the 4 at the back formation. I do prefer to have 3 defenders and 7 attackers. That's just for the higher attacking upside, because attacking players have a higher ceiling. Building from the back, the highest owned first team goalkeeper is Raya. Over 1 in 5 teams own him. I don't think I'll be starting the season with him, and I will tell you why in a minute, but I do understand why he's there. Arsenal had by far the most clean sheets last season, the most promising underlying stats in defence, and the least amount of goals conceded. Something that goes against the Arsenal goalkeeper is that he's probably not going to rack up many save points. Arsenal faced the least amount of shots on target last season. Due to the goalkeeper position being the highest scoring position on the pitch, I would rather go for a 4.5 mil goalkeeper and invest that money elsewhere in my squad where I'm more likely to get points from it. On the flip side, he is a safe option going into the new FPL season, and he's probably the cheapest reliable route into the Arsenal defence right now, but he doesn't have the potential to provide high value for money like some of the cheaper goalkeepers. The highest owned backup goalkeeper right now is Turner. He's only 4 mil, and he's actually owned more than Raya. I've not put him in the first team because he's not nil for Forest. I would say that he's probably got the highest chance of starting out of all the backup goalkeepers, but there isn't one that stands out, and I still doubt that he will start for Forest. He is competing with 2 other goalkeepers. However, he did play over 1,500 minutes last season for Forest, so I do think there is a small chance. I have got him sat on my bench as well, so I don't disagree with this pick. However, if you've got a first team goalkeeper that if he gets injured, a £4 million goalkeeper from the same club comes in, I would put him on your bench, providing you're not blocking the 3rd slot from that club. For example, if you've got Pickford in your first team, put Virginia from Everton on your bench who's a 4 mil goalkeeper. Pickford was to get injured, Virginia would step in, you'd still have a backup goalkeeper, which isn't guaranteed with Turner. In defence, Saliba's by far the highest owned defender in the whole game. He's got over 40% ownership, and I can understand why, like I mentioned about Raya with Arsenal's defence, but if I was to pick an Arsenal defender for 6 mil, I'd go for Gabriel because he's got a much higher goal threat. I don't think this is a bad pick. He will rack up the clean sheets, he will rack up the minutes, therefore you probably won't have to spend any free transfers on him. You can spend it on the rest of your team. As a side note, there are 3 Arsenal defenders that are priced 6 million or above, and of course there will be a 4th starting defender, so let's keep an eye out in pre-season to see if we can nail that 4th starting Arsenal defender for less than 6 mil. For the same price and owned in 10% less of teams is Gvardiol. Now I think he's actually a better pick than Saliba. He provides a lot more attacking threat, and if any defence in the whole league is going to keep up with Arsenal for clean sheets, it will probably be City. Porro is in just over a quarter of teams. I understand because of the attacking threat that he provides for a defender, but I can't see Spurs keeping a clean sheet in game week 3 against Newcastle away, or in game week 4 against Arsenal at home, especially with how bad the Spurs defence was last season. I know some people make a point of saying we're picking for the attacking returns and not the clean sheets, but why do that when you can have both? I'd rather have an attacking defender from a team that looks like it's going to keep clean sheets, which to be fair might be Spurs if the defence improves this season and they get a decent fixture run. I wouldn't say Porro's a bad pick because of his attacking potential, but right now I don't think it's worth spending 5.5 mil on him. Burns owned by bang on 23% of teams. Problem is that he's not nailed, so we need to monitor Newcastle in pre-season, and if he does play, he's good value for money for 4.5 mil. Providing he does look like he's going to play, I think he's a good pick. The highest owned budget defender is Harwood Bellis for nearly 15% ownership. I can't disagree with this. He's as nailed as it gets for that price tag. I have discussed other options in my first draft video because there are plenty of them, but you're not going to be able to upgrade him on expected minutes. In midfield is Palmer, owned by more than half of teams, and he's still not the highest owned player in the game. You'll see who that is later on in the video. I'm not surprised that he's owned by so many FPL managers. He was the highest scoring player in the game last season. However, Chelsea open up against City at home, and in game week 3 they've got Palace as well, who have a decent defence, who had the 4th best expected goals conceded figure in the whole league last season. With those unfavourable opening fixtures, I'd rather downgrade him to someone with easier opening fixtures like Saka, spend that £500,000 elsewhere, and bring him in when the fixtures swing. Because of what he can provide, I don't think he's a bad pick, he's just not one of my favourite picks. Someone who is one of my favourite picks is the second highest owned midfielder at 37.3% ownership, that's Gordon. Newcastle get to open up against Southampton at home, then in the first 5 game weeks, there's no difficult fixtures from an attacking perspective. If you've seen enough drafts, you'll know that there's a lot of attacking options this season because of the decent pricing, so whilst Gordon wasn't in my first draft, he's definitely on my watch list, and he's a good pick. Eze is owned by just over a third of teams. I think that ownership should be a lot higher. I think he'll provide plenty of value for money for just 7 mil. He's on penalty duties. His underlying stats were very promising last season, and he'll get plenty of minutes. It helps that Palace don't have any difficult fixtures from an attacking perspective in the first 6 game weeks. That includes favourable fixtures against West Ham at home in game week 2 and Leicester at home in game week 4. Completing the starting midfielders is Mo Salah. He's on 32.5% ownership, which at first I thought was quite low. Then I understand with Haaland being 15 mil, people are struggling to fit both of them in the teams. Personally, I'm picking both of them for captain rotation. I suggest you build a captaincy matrix, take a look at who you plan on captaining in the upcoming game weeks, then decide what premiums you're going to have in your team. If you want to see how you can squeeze both of them in a decent team, watch my first draft video because they're both included in there with plenty of high value for money players. I have actually made a couple of upgrades to that draft. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss my updated draft video. In fact, if you're enjoying the video or you're finding it informative, you might as well subscribe anyway. The last midfielder is on the bench. He's only 4.5 mil, it's Winks, and he's got less than 10% ownership. He's the only nailed on attacker at that price tag in the whole game. I'm surprised his ownership's not higher. You're not telling me that over 90% of teams have got a 5 midfielder formation. If you've got less than 5 midfielders, need a backup midfielder, have him on your bench. You don't want to be wasting free transfers on your bench. To be fair, from now until game week 1, there might be another 4.5 mil midfielder with a higher attacking upside that seems to become nailed, but right now, Winks is the best option. There's not really anyone available at that price tag in the forwards department. Fraser's the highest owned at 4.3%, and even he probably won't play. Now, it would sound harsh of me to be critical, because in that position at that price tag, there aren't any decent alternatives available, but a solution I've got is to switch up a different formation. For example, you could have a 3-4-3, then you wouldn't need a backup forward on the bench. You'd still have Winks there on the bench as your backup midfielder, and there's plenty of £4 million options available to offer reliable insurance on the bench. Plus, when I mentioned at the start of the video, with a 4-defender formation, you do have a lower ceiling. The highest owned player in the whole game right now is Watkins, 0.7% more people own him than Palmer. Barring Arsenal at home in game week 2, Villa do have favourable opening fixtures from an attacking perspective, and he might even be on penalty duties due to the departure of Douglas Luiz. If he has got penalties, I do think he's worth 9 mil. However, if he's not got penalties, I don't think he's worth it. Last season he was expected to get 7.3 assists and he racked up 18 assists, which includes fantasy assists, which is a massive overperformance, and I do think those expected numbers will regress. So that's the reason why he was the high scoring forward last season, which is the reason why so many people have picked him. And to add to that, in his career, he's took 9 penalties, he's only scored 4 and he's missed 5. And to compare that against the average benchmark, players tend to score at least 3/4 of the penalties on average. So whilst you can't rule him out for penalty duties, it does look unlikely. And I'd say right now, I don't think Watkins is a good pick for 9 mil. Personally, I think Isak is a better alternative. Over half of FPL managers own him, just not quite as many as Watkins and Palmer. He's more likely to take penalties because that's his responsibility when Wilson's not on the pitch, which is quite often. Like I mentioned with Gordon, the first 5 fixtures are favourable from an attacking perspective, especially Southampton at home in game week 1. Isak's on my watch list for game week 1. I think he's a decent option. It's worth saving that £500,000 on Watkins in my opinion. Now to rate the template. I wouldn't say it's too bad. If a casual manager showed me this, I'd be quite impressed that they've built it. However, as a highly engaged manager, if you give me this team to start the season, I wouldn't be too happy about it. But again, overall, if you consider the whole player base, I don't think it's too bad. I'd rate it about 7 out of 10, but it could definitely be upgraded quite a bit. If you found this video informative or enjoyable, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any future videos like this.